very pleased to welcome you to the first Provost Roundtable of Berlin School of Business and Innovation. We selected today to discuss about the most burning global issue, which is energy. The main rationale for our choice was first to provide accurate information of what the energy crisis means. And secondly, to demonstrate that BSBI is an active part of the society. Following this reference, I want to introduce our Provost, Professor Dr. Kyriakos Koveliotis, who is going to be the moderator of the roundtable. So some things for our Provost. Professor Kyriakos Koveliotis is the Provost of the Berlin School of Business and Innovation. He has a PhD in European Integration and International Relations, awarded by Newcastle University, whereas he also holds a Master in Diplomacy awarded by Lancaster University, UK, a certificate in Linguistics awarded by Bangor University, UK, and a Bachelor in English Literature and Linguistics awarded by Aristotle University of Thessaloniki, Greece. He has also completed 2 cycles of postdoctorate research, one on decision and policy making, and one on conflict resolution and crisis management. Professor Koveliotis has worked in various research groups. He is an accomplished researcher in a variety of disciplines, and in the last 20 years, he has taught in many universities and educational organizations globally, among which Newcastle University, University of Sunderland, Deary College, University of Indianapolis, Hellenic Air Force War College, and Hellenic Naval War College, to name a few. He's an expert in developing new curricula, program syllabi, and also building new global educational networks and partnerships, as he has already done with institutions from the US, UK, France, Italy, Switzerland, and Ireland, but also Singapore, India, and Somalia. Professor Koveliotis has published 12 books and dozens of original scientific articles. His track record of academic publishing is composed of a variety of papers concerning political, economic, and educational issues. He has also served as a scientific advisor to Minister of Defense, the Deputy Minister of Development and Competitiveness, and to the General Secretariat of Communication and Mass Media of the Greek government. He has recently been appointed by the Minister of Education as member in the governing committee of Hellenic Open University. He also holds various professorships in institutions around the world, as he is the honorary rector of James Lind Institute and of the Rashford Business School in Geneva, Switzerland, the honorary chancellor of Longford International College in Ireland, a professor at the University of Unitono in Rome, Italy, and the president of Athenaeum Liberal Studies. Professor, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Ahmed. I have to admit I feel a little bit older now, hearing all this, but many thanks for your introduction. So, dear friends and colleagues, I also want to welcome you to this new initiative of the academic team. The reason that we're all here today is to discuss one of the most burning and hot issues in Europe and in the international scenery as well, which is nothing else than energy. This is something that engages all our thoughts and even our families. There are discussions in institutions, among politicians, in international organizations, in international fora, in the European Union, nearly everywhere. And As Ahmed said before, because BSBI is an integral part of society and it's a live organization, I was thinking, let's start this series of roundtables with something that we all deserve to know what is really happening, and to provide to our audience, among ourselves, but mainly to our students, concise and precise information on what is happening with energy, what is its future, the perspectives for the coming years, and also exchange some thoughts. So in this framework, I have invited some of our colleagues, some of our top professors in the school, each one of them from different disciplines and academic domains. And I have asked them also to prepare some questions which I'm going to ask them. So to make a more structured conversation, let's say, which outcome is, as I mentioned, to provide accurate and correct information so that we go one step behind what you're reading in the news, read behind the lines, and also, why not advise some other people when you are engage yourself in this kind of conversation, because it's a very hot topic and everybody's talking about that. So following this reference, I'm going to very briefly introducing my colleagues. And beforehand, I want to thank them very much for their participation today and for what they have prepared to discuss. And I will start with Dr. Farsad, who is a lecturer at BSBI. He's also coordinating the postdoctoral research center that recently the school has. He's also the associate editor of the information technology and informatics at BSBI. Regarding his studies, he holds a PhD in human-centered communication and informatics, an MSc in software IT, specialized in information systems, and also his areas of research are logic, cognitive science, information science, symbolic artificial intelligence, system management, and knowledge management. Then Dr. Fundis is a head of UG studies at BSBI. He holds a BSc in physics, an MBA, and a DBA. He's an author and co-author of books and articles in peer-reviewed journals, and his research areas are business, STEM studies, and cybernetics. He's alumnus of the Program for National and International Security of the JFK School of Government at Harvard University. Then we have Mrs. Smati Jivan, who is a lecturer at BSBI, holds a master's degree in information technology, and currently doing her research on Li-Fi and the 5G of the internet. Then we have Dr. Elif Vozar, who has a double bachelor degree in business administration and international relations, an MSc in international tourism management, and completed a PhD in socio-cognitive mindfulness theory, which is a very interesting area. And last but not least, Dr. Mahmoud Manafi, who has a doctorate in business administration and conducted numerous research in the areas of renewable energy and sustainability, business and management, HRM, and innovation. So regarding your experience, your academic experience so far, you are one of the most qualified persons to discuss the energy crisis and the future of energy. Now, I will start with Elif. And when we start preparing how to approach the current energy crisis, and when I ask you to prepare some questions, the first that came into my office, and this is what I'm going to ask you now, it's very interesting because it focuses on the core of the issue for me. So the question is, the energy crisis is putting stress on many businesses, also on all of us on the personal level, including the tourism sector also. And as you know, in BSBI, we have degrees in the relevant disciplines. And now we have in energy as well. So how can the concept of mindfulness, which is also your research area, help businesses and other organizations to navigate this crisis. And because a large audience is attending us, I want you to be as simple as possible and not be so academic oriented, let's say. But your own research can provide some solutions, I think. Because we all hear about the energy problems and that Germany, for example, has sufficient supplies up to 85%, but what we're willing to do for the rest 50% that are missing. Other countries have bigger issues. So how is this domain that you have conducted research and about what I asked you is going to provide a solution?
Thank you for asking the question. Actually, as I have a background in tourism, and as we were telling, like I used the mindfulness theory as an approach to the visitor-environment relations. It can be a solution once we apply the mindfulness theory to the tourism and hospitality sector. According to the latest statistics, for instance, like one side of the problem, food waste and energy consumption, it is the biggest, one of the biggest issues in tourism and hospitality sector related to the energy. Mindfulness theory is basically, I'm just like trying to be so brief. Basically, it's focusing on how the individuals, how the tourists learning can be enhanced, and result of like the level of mindfulness, if it is increased, then it will be helpful for the making them more like conservation oriented, being more like sustainable in their daily lives. So just like even as I was talking about food waste, just in Germany, 12 million tons of food waste, and if we think about the hospitality sector, 15% of this 12 million tons can be attributed to the food sector on its own. And when we talk about this, it is just like it includes the energy consumption during the production of that food, and also just like the carbon footprints, all this energy used. So it's just like complicated problem. And if I can like later explain more, but this mindfulness theory can be just like helpful, at least for one side of the problem.
Okay, thank you. So the essence from what I understood is what we can call self-awareness. And that, of course, you have explored it via a scientific way, and in particular this theory, but self-awareness means that you need to be the solution that you expect from others. So when you leave the school or leave your office or leave your home and you leave the lights on, to give a simple example, then this is not a solution. Everything it's focusing on the individual. So it's a good starting point. And why it's a good starting point? Because we should not expect from governments or from companies or from organizations to act on behalf of us without us being first the example. And this we need to start from where we work and where we live and from our own families. And maybe this is a good opportunity not to use this energy crisis as a case study, as an example of other sectors as well, and for what is going to be in the future. And since the school is offering lots of business courses and everything that is related to the industry and the markets, the next question I'm going to ask Dr. Fundis is, taking into consideration what we're experiencing right now, currently, how do you evaluate the current situation in the energy markets? Because as you know, when a crisis starts and affects one sector, then it spreads like, I don't want to use the word virus for obvious reasons, but I will. So it spreads like this. So we are not even free from COVID yet, and we have another huge challenge. And now even the markets, they don't know how to control themselves. So what's the answer to this?
First of all, I'm feeling a bit guilty now because with this transition, what Elif mentioned, because I'm using my car to go back and forth instead of using the metro. So this gives me exactly the point that the Provost asked, that after the COVID we were in a situation practically where we were happy, most probably it is over, and suddenly we saw the prices getting stabilized and everything, and then with the events in Ukraine, we started, it happened something in a reverse way, what happened with the COVID. We started having a panic, practically. And perhaps many of the things are getting exaggerated because in this case we're getting prepared for the worst scenarios. Let's say if you see, I say that we are moving in a spectrum between a dystopia and an utopia, practically. Because you can move this either to the very bad scenarios or the very good scenarios. So for example, there are good news despite the crisis, that for example, the 40% of the natural gas that we are using is produced in Europe. Germany, which was one of the countries, for example, that has come in the target of everybody because of this relation with Russia and this dependency, for example, they switched already to the Netherlands after the sanctions of the United Nations, to the Netherlands and Norway. So the government started reacting somehow, slowly, but as said, there are good scenarios in these cases. I don't think that the things will accelerate to a direction that we will have to switch off complete blocks of houses and not having energy. Let's say for this, because we are focusing on the European perspective. Of course, this is moving us far away from the utopia, and the utopia would be for the future to have green energies. And you remember that there were many governments that they were saying up to 2025, up to 2035, we will switch, no coal, no natural gas, everything green and everything, so we'll stop and we will move within 10 years. My personal opinion immediately is that we will lose at least 2 or 3 years now with the current situation, that we will restart this discussion. So already this agenda has shifted in the near future.
And we all know which country initiated this, which I'm not going to comment further, but so from your perspective, how will the markets react if this energy crisis continues also next year? Because if this is an aftermath of what is happening now in Ukraine, it's not going to end next month. And of course, maybe the supplies are, for example, in Germany that we are now, are up to 85% or 90% this month. But in 10 months, because the winter is coming, that supplies will go to 5%. So what is going to happen after, let's say, next spring of 2023?
I was reading that Japan activated 2 days ago the plan that they stopped in 2011 with nuclear energy. Nuclear energy counts for 10% of the European portfolio of energy. And also France is making, it was the classical, it was over 60-70% I think of the production. We will move to, that's why I said to this dystopia to utopia spectrum, we will move to some scenarios from the resources that we have. This is how the scenario is going. Of course, we have the LNG story with the United States that they said that they will transfer this to Europe, but then we are having many problems with the floating LNG terminals and the infrastructure. I think this will take longer. On the other side, you see that on other parts of the planet, what is happening, because we had, especially with the natural gas from Russia, there was this discussion with President Putin that he said at a certain stage, you don't want this, I will give this to the Chinese and to the Indians, practically. But what happened also there, this is not so an adequate corridor, let's say, to put all this energy, because, for example, all the industrial activity of China is at the coast. And this pipeline will get finalized at the end of 2025. So you see everybody, because of these moves is trying to make scenarios. Even in India, that there was a discussion that there is a huge quantity going there. This is getting out of India via the networks. It's coming back to Europe.
You opened many windows.
Yes,
and I know you have a vast knowledge about this. And talking about knowledge, Dr. Farsad, you created a very interesting term, energy knowledge community. So the question is, what does this energy knowledge community mean, and what are the significant characteristics that we can apply to this current energy crisis?
Absolutely. Very good. Thank you very much. Let me start with something historical. After World War II, in fact, we had a special focus on mass production, but it focused later and later and later on services. So now we are moving on a service-oriented world. And this is how we can, as a community of individual agents, have a good conception of this terminology knowledge in different communities. Okay, this is a very technical word, but what happens when we are moving from goods to services, and how we can have such a conception? According to what's mentioned, I believe that an energy-based knowledge community would be a very nice, in fact, platform for individual people who are from different perspectives, different cultural, scientific, political, scientific from other disciplines of science, economical, and also psychological points of view in different European countries are all sitting together and all exchanging ideas based on their own vocabularies, based on their own understanding of energy. So this concept of knowledge community actually came to my mind when in 2019, I designed a model of learning as a kind of learning model for knowledge communities. That how different people, based on their own observations of the world, based on how they are interpreting some specific concept, in this scenario, the service of energy production, the service of energy consumption, energy transformation, how they can exchange ideas together. They can talk together. They can, in fact, exchange ideas. They can go for different communications, informational exchange. And of course, we can have some service-oriented information technology, in fact, platforms on the web and on other social media, in fact, channels that people freely exchange ideas together and go for making a stronger and a stronger and a stronger knowledge community. When I flash back to, in fact, World War II, of course, you are an expert in cybernetics. Cybernetics as a theory of controlling individual agents and the brain of humans, animals, and also machines, and also as a control theory, in fact established after World War. Because World War was a kind of, I don't know why, I am really studying this. It was a kind of initial point for artificial intelligence in cybernetics, information theory in cybernetics, data science in cybernetics. And later, people are really getting more interested in communities and exchanging ideas and understanding essential concepts relevant to some important natural concepts, first of all, because it's all about coming to the concept of environment. This environment was a concept that science borrowed from ecosystems, but later it was redeveloped in communities, in different, in fact, conversational exchange, in different associations. I believe this is the future of Europe if we want to define a platform for exchanging ideas based on our own understanding of the world and based on our own requirements, of course, based on how I am seeing the world and how I am feeling the world.
I think now you open a bigger window, which is the future of Europe, but I think we need a couple of sessions just for that. The first part of what you mentioned, I think if we have some people attending from the United Nations, they would love it. which is probably the correct optimistic approach, which of course I agree. Don't forget that we are in Berlin. We are in a city that after the Second World War, at the end of it actually, it was completely destroyed, nearly 95%, if I'm not wrong. And imagine the energy needs during the reconstruction phase and also the energy needs of the country immediately afterwards. So it's a very interesting case study if you want to study it further. Now, we'll come to Dr. Manafi, and we are not looking for solutions. Maybe the solutions is not in the continent of Europe. So the question is, because you also made an interesting approach, how Southeast Asia, for example, can help to solve the European Union's energy crisis? Is it possible to try and find solutions outside the geographical and geopolitical area of Europe?
Okay, thank you. First of all, I want to say I like the initial point of the discussion. It started from inside the Europe and, for example, about educating the people and society, and also investing on the technology and knowledge to maybe increase the consumption of energy or to present something as a energy consumption pattern. But out of Europe, as you said, for example, I can relate it to the supply chain management. I want to say at the beginning, usually in the supply chain management, try to find a dependable supplier for long term for energy. But now, historical evidence showed that maybe Russia wasn't that much trustworthy. But I prefer not to go into detail of discussion. But by the way, currently in the center of Asia and also southwest of Asia, there are some countries that are supplying energy to Europe. But even the transportation, the energy from this country can be affected by, for example, Iran and Russia. Or even if they try to find another way for transportation, then will be affected by the political relations of this country with the neighbors like Armenia, like Azerbaijan, or with other countries. So I can say maybe Iran could be a good replace, regardless of this advantage or disadvantage of this relation, but I think could be good substitution for the energy of the Europe.
This is very interesting. Let me return to you, Dr. Faisal. It is also a logistics crisis. Okay. And as you know, we are very much attached to information systems globally, and especially in the supply chain as well. So, in relation to energy, how may we represent and analyze the concept of energy and its crisis via the information systems? To simplify it, how information technology can assist in providing solutions?
Absolutely, very good. First of all, I want to say again something historical. In 1950s, after World War, again, we started with cost minimization. But now we are moving towards value, in fact, maximization. This movement from costs to value has shaped the semantics of information systems. In fact, when I am as a kind of information developer, as a kind of data scientist, focusing on modeling an information system for representing and for interpreting the concept of energy, I need to know what is the semantics behind this. What is the interpretation behind this? There is a semantics behind a grammar, and there is a semantics after the grammar. This semantics is all about the value. It's all about the global markets that we are living in this world. So, how we can interpret such a concept? I believe that we need three factors. The first one is the vocabulary, what in artificial intelligence and information systems we call terminological knowledge. What is my term? How this term gets represented? How this term, which is non-logical term, in fact, this is not related to logical operators like and, or, then, so. This is a non-logical word. How this non-logical word can be represented in our terminological box, knowledge box or T box. This is the first. The second one, how I can assertion my knowledge, how I can go for creation of assertional knowledge, and how different components of different countries in Europe can be in fact conceptualized by this terminology. So this is called assertional knowledge, or A box. In A box, I am focusing on some specific energy resources, solar energy, natural energy, and how different agents in different conceptualization platforms can describe this assertional knowledge. The third one is R box, or rule-based box. How, based on the interrelationships between T box and A box, I can go for representation of rules. Rule is how we are going through ethics, how we are going for inferencing, for reasoning, and for argumentation. So this movement from a general semantics, what is the value of energy in my mind as a kind of local area? And then what is the value of energy in some global local areas? And finally, what is the meaning of this energy in the global market? I will go for finding a terminology, the vocabulary of whatness of energy, and how this energy being defined, being in a conceptual form, a logical form, in fact, I don't say interpreted because it's about semantics, how it will be in fact grammatically expressed, and then how it will be analyzed based on interpretations of different agents, different communities, different groups, and how finally we go for ethical and we go for argumentative concepts behind this grammar.
Okay, that's interesting, especially because you mentioned the ethical perspective that we all seem to forget sometimes, especially at the political level. And it's very interesting what you also mentioned about artificial intelligence, and also to use the right vocabulary and generally for technology. So what I'm going to ask you, how can technology solve then the energy crisis? Is this possible?
Yes, that is possible. I believe that every problem has a solution. First, of course, we were coping up with COVID-19. We didn't come up with that situation, and that this Russia and Ukraine invasions happened. So in the last few months, we got 7% of inflation. That's a lot. So sometimes it's not necessary to always think about out of the box. Sometimes we can think what we can do with the box. So I can say we can find the solutions with renewable and non-renewable energy resources that we are moving. And according to a survey, Germany by 2050, they are trying to make it like 90% of carbon free. Their target is something like that, especially the fossil fuels. So that's why they started with EV, electronic vehicles. They have started with very good startups. We are standing actually at the land of the startups. This is what I believe. I did MA in innovation also, so I learned that many people can, especially the private firms, can come into the limelight with the help of government, and they can produce more things. Let's talk about even single example of energy. If we are using HAVC, heat, air, and it's air conditioning. So we have renewable energies, but it's not only about producing the energy. It's about the producing, supplying, and then the storage is also important if we are moving towards that energies. So that's why the technology can help here. As he has expertise in AI, we have solar banks. We are storing the energy. There are so many startups, like we call them clean tech startups, basically, and it's from the Europe. I have a long list. I read even 2-3 days ago. There are so many startups, individual and even the private companies. They are really working on those ones. They are creating some sensors. They are creating some equipments that are really helpful and connected to the AI so that you get the data on your phones. That's really amazing, because if we don't have the data, we cannot calculate how much we are left with the energy and how much the energy we can use in the future, because we know the fact it's a renewable energy, and it's not renewable energy just getting it, because we need to work behind that one. For an example, solar energy, we need some photoelectric foils. It doesn't take all the solar energy, it separates the wavelength, the energy that we need only, that is there, and the rest is vanish. So this is how the startups, especially if I tell some of the names, solar banks, jet apps, they are creating very good, and they are all European startups. They are working with the government, getting fundings, and especially with the EV station, electronic vehicle charging stations. And they are using some nickel batteries, they are using some lithium batteries to store those energies. So, and one of the most important examples, we are using Wi-Fi to collect the data. There is one more energy, or I can say 5th generation, Li-Fi will come into the limelight. It is actually one of the German scientists, Professor Haas, is already working on that one. We will get the signals from the light. So that is completely green energy. And most of the people, they don't know about it, because the Wi-Fi is surrounded with radioactive waves, and radio-based stations really creating a lot of carbon emission. So we are switching towards it. So I think technology, engineering has a very good impact that can move us.
Very interesting what you mentioned. It's so interesting that I'm actually expecting from you a paper for the journal and also to contribute in the Gazette.
Okay.
Now that you mentioned all this, but you also mentioned charging and the use how electricity is moved to cars and bicycles. This is my comment, of course, but let's think about it. Have you ever considered what will happen energy-wise if everybody in, let's say, the next 10 years turn to electric cars? Because the electric cars, they have batteries, but they need charging.
Yes.
So I have read, I think, a couple of years ago, an article by the president or the CEO of Toyota in Japan, and he said that if we suddenly exceed the 30% of dropping our conventional cars and move towards electric cars, the consumption of energy will be higher because of the electricity that is. So I don't know if those that are taking this kind of decisions at the global scale, they have calculated up to what extent we can make this change or this shift. What I can tell you is that if there is a global trend, it will take less years than you think for a major change to happen, positive or negative. And an example of this is what happened in New York when they shifted from the carriages with horses as a public transportation to cars. It took them back then 4 to 8 years. But if you think that we're talking about the beginning of 90-something, that time was nearly nothing back then for such a major change. So here it will take months. So consider these things. And I have to return to the individual and to the self-awareness that we have discussed. So Elif, the first thing that comes to mind when we discuss about mindfulness and how we perceive this, and what we should do. Is peacefulness, meditation, self-knowledge, self-exploration useful? Can you explain what we mean by this kind of concept and how all these are relevant to what the other colleagues mentioned, especially about sustainability? Recycling, for example, which is something that I hope we all do and start from us. It's in our homes. But how many of us know how to properly recycle things? And sometimes we're doing more damage than help the environment. Like, for example, everything has to be clean, not with other dirty things, and separate them, and you know, it's a whole process. Maybe we should have a session here also for students and stuff. So, what is your approach on this?
So, first of all, I can maybe just do the distinction now. So there are two types of mindfulness. One is Eastern or meditative mindfulness. The other one is socio-cognitive mindfulness or Western mindfulness. So I'm specialized in the socio-cognitive mindfulness, which is like first it was applied to the psychology, social psychology, and then it was applied to lots of other disciplines. So it was applied to tourism. So it is actually like based on the theory, there are two concepts, mindfulness and mindlessness. So these based on like how people are responding to the new information and how they process the new information. So if, for instance, the level of mindfulness increases, then if there are like mindful information around, just like information about their like daily life consumption, or if they are staying at the hotels, just if there are some again like information related to how to, as you said, like recycle, or just like to motivate them to do like small steps maybe, but just like use maybe like public transports, or just like the other like energy related consumption at the hotels, for instance. So like if there are information around and if those information really just like make sense for them, if those information presented maybe just like way that they can be connected to those information, then like mindful individuals, they can receive those information, process those information better, and in the end they can learn, and after that learning process, and just like they can be more like conservation oriented. But whereas the mindless individuals, as they can't just like process those information, it can be harder.
Very interesting as well, and you see, at the end, we have to face ourselves and be more aware of all this. Let's now shift from the individual to countries. And Dr. Manafi, you commented briefly on how other countries probably they assist or find some solutions. But if we see those countries that are energy sufficient, and let's say they're powerful in that sense, one of these countries is Iran.
Yes.
And we all know about the oil reserves and all this. So if we consider what you have mentioned, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, what is Iran's role in the European Union's energy crisis?
Actually, I think it's still going on, and it's not done yet, but I think if they can improve the relation between Iran and some of the existing sanction lift, then many European countries can come to, for example, in the south of Iran and help to extract and production of the oil and gas. But on the other hand, also, for example, Russia will have another competitor. So when the competition again starts, many things I believe that will change. And regardless, as I said, regardless of the disadvantage of this relation or signing the contract or something, but I think in general helps to the energy shortage of the European Union.
Right. That's amazing, because this is a perspective that I don't think many people have realized, that it is viable. It's not just on the horizon. So we focus on the individual, on the countries, but on a practical level, I want to return to Svante.
Yeah.
Because practicality means we need organizations or companies or even startups
Yes.
that everything that we discuss on a theoretical level, with the help of technology, which I have to connect it with how technology is used in education, which is not just a helping tool anymore, it creates its own methodology. This is important to comprehend. It's not a helping tool. It generates solutions in a sui generis, let's say, way. So, can you give us some examples, without advertising them, of course,
Yeah, of course.
of startups which are already helping, to solve the energy crisis?
Okay, if you ask me as being a human being, I cannot do the fasting. So I would rather find some healthy options to eat. That means I'm looking for the substitutes that can give me energy. At the same time, I can lose weight and I can be more fit. So this is how I believe every problem can be solved if we find some substitute for it. So as I was giving example, if we need EV cars, of course it needs energy. So first of all, we need the EV base stations. And I think that is one of the very popular companies, Tesla. They started with the EVs, electronic vehicles, but at the same time, they are more working on the EV stations, so that before selling the car, they should have the battery system where they can charge, so that consumers can buy more. Because if we see historically, first car was the EV car, actually, electronic vehicle. But why it came to limelight now? Just because the next thing that was thought by the Tesla, that's why they become popular, because they gave another solution. They thought about rest of the 5 minutes or the planning for 5 years or 10 years. So this is how it works. Some of the companies like solar banks, what they are creating small banks like batteries that you can easily fit into any of the households. A normal person even also can afford that, and then you can fit into the houses and get the energy. One more example I was reading recently, greenhouse effects, we all know that, and because of ozone depletion layer, now it's really difficult to have something in the agriculture sector. So now IoT specifically, even the research is going on in Germany. They are building artificial greenhouse with the IoT, Internet of Things, fitting some sensors. Whenever there is heat or air, or even the air conditioning has some variation in the temperature, the vents will open automatically. So no need of any person to go and open the vents. This will be a very good help for the agriculture sector. This is how they are working with Internet of Things. And the person who has installed that one, let's say farmer, he will get all the data on his phone or maybe the monitors, whatever he has installed. So this is how this IT or information technology, along with engineering, because sensors has been installed and so many small particles, chips are needed. So they are really, I can say it's a complete revolution that will come, and or that is already there, but we are moving towards it.
Very good point. And I want to close this structured round and then having a more open discussion with you, Dr. Fundi. So this is a more general question, so I'm going to ask it at the end. Which are the scenarios for the future of energy in Europe?
First of all, from what we heard, or why we are here today, it's because there is the interconnection between information and energy. Otherwise, we could not transmit practically. Correct? This is something that we cannot go back. On the other side, in this spectrum of dystopia and utopia, I read something yesterday, the German news, from my mobile, they have there some news batch that's coming. And I kept a note on this. There is an article at the Environmental and Innovation Societal Transition Journal, which has the following title: 10 financial actors can accelerate the transition away from fossil fuels. It sounds good. If you read the article that I took in my hand, was the German media, it was something like a conspiracy theory. They said there are 8 American companies, Norway, the public oil company, plus Saudi Arabia with Aramco, which is one of the biggest companies of the world, that they control 50% or plus of the world energy. So they don't want to do that. If you read the article, which by the way has been published today, because I saw this yesterday evening, it's the 1st of September. Today you can find this when you will hear again the title for this journal. If you read the article, it's a completely different story. It's how we see the thing. So what I want to say by this, the scenarios are there. It has to do a little bit with the cybernetics, because there is this famous theory that we are finding from time to time. We find this in the 70s and the 80s. This is coming again back with Stafford Beer, with a viable model, that you are making loops, you see what is happening, you see the interactions, you try to optimize the organizations, how we are organized. Okay, the reality we know. We are depending something like 84% of the primary sector depends on the fossil fuels. 60% of the electricity in 2020 worldwide was again by fossil fuels. But still, we have to count what is the rest. This will not stop. Okay, that's why I spoke before about we having a crisis, but okay, this what it will create is just perhaps a shift of the agenda, because it's a way, a path that we are already in. So it sounds that we will go more to the utopia than to the dystopia, because there is the global awareness. This is the most important.
You know, I want to stress something, because at the European level, I see when member states are discussing, sometimes 27 different voices. And as you know, in many of the pillars of the EU, there is this famous unanimity principle, and everybody should agree unanimously on what to do and the measures and everything. But energy-wise, each country has different needs and different use. And some, they rely more on nuclear energy, like France, or some others, they rely more on natural gas, like Germany, or some others in the Mediterranean, they adopt a combination of all these sources, which means that the solutions maybe need to be customized and not taken at such a central level, but under the same values and the ethics that we mentioned. And this is not happening. And you know what, if you think and you take the history of humankind, in the last 3,000 or 4,000 years, we did not learn how to be smarter or write better or to write poems that are better or even music. And if you really ask me, I'm not even optimistic that we're going better. So that means we have the same mentality and the way we think as we always did. And that means we need to trust other people, talk more, try to find solutions that affect others, because at the end of the day, from everything that you discussed and commented, the opposite thing is happening. Globalization is still alive. Anybody that attended what we said, so it's not over. It's not a post-pandemic era of crisis and what happened with the logistics at a global scale. It's still there. That means, regardless of the customization and of the individual solution for each country, we still all need to work together. And to sum it up, what I learned today is some very interesting points that goes outside the numbers and the statistics and the funding and the financial aspect. And this is self-awareness, that we need a knowledge community and not what is being transmitted to us always by the media or by popular wisdom, to put it in that way. Also, solutions may come outside Europe. And that above all, there is at the same time a huge logistics crisis. And if you can name it like a Bermuda Triangle, when you have the post-COVID, if it's post situation, plus the logistics crisis, plus the energy, and you put all this together, it doesn't sound good. On the other hand, like with COVID, we have data, and although this energy crisis is current, we can use it as an example, because now it's energy, natural gas, and maybe 2 years it will be water, or it will be crude oil, or it will be something similar. So what the global situation is showing us is that maybe this is a postmodernist era, dystopian or utopian, but this is how it's going to be for the next decades. The only difference from the past is that things now are happening faster. So I want to close this from asking you to give some last comments if you want. Let's start with the ladies. So what do you think about all this?
I mean, we talked about all these, like there are, as you said, like lots of improvements going on, technological improvements, and at the same time, also people are just like people's awareness are getting better, and they are more aware of the things, and we see like good examples going on. So I am sort of optimistic and believing that just like all this like crisis, it will be just like settled, just like with all of the things we discussed, with the help of those things, I think it will be settled. It might take time, but I'm just in the optimistic side.
Good. Okay, Zvat.
I think the government and the venture capitalists together can really make a huge difference, especially with the clean tech. This is my thinking, and as you said, we are moving faster. So I think the technology can make it more better. I believe that it will act as a catalyst when we want to do the reaction faster. So clean tech will be very helpful for that.
Indeed. Dr. Manafi?
Actually, I think I agree with so I think, but the only thing that I remember she said talking about using technology, but when you are using technology devices, again we are spending a lot of energy. We should do some research about this if it really works, and also about a personal point of view. I mean, individually, I think the people need to grow, and I believe that it takes time.
Yeah, you need to be the change that you ask other people to be. Okay. Yes, indeed. Tassos.
As you said, the globalization is still alive, but with other terms. Because through these shocks or these scenarios that we were not prepared, we are going to a new era that is not only how to monetize practically all transactions, this cost, the value creation, and so it's a notion, it's a paradigm shift that exists. And also the point about the cyber, so practically cybernetics, and this is from a word, it's about steering in Greek, practically in the Greek language. So we need better steering better guidance through this new world practically. But I think there is, I'm also an optimist because this is the human history. So at the end, through the pain and the sorrow and all these feelings and all these bad experiences, we are moving always to the next step.
And Dr. Fassel.
Yeah, if I want really to come up with a language of operations management, I would say that it's all about value creation and about customization, as you mentioned. In fact, customization is how operational scenarios in all domains are getting manifested in the modern world. It's all about customization of contextualization. So it is how in different communities, based on different communications, based on different ethical observations, based on different, in fact, conceptualized understanding of the environment, we can have a betterment of our value creation and our consumption customization.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very
and
much.
thank you all for your valuable contribution and the time that you spent. I think those that they attended us, they learned something today. I did. The next Provost Roundtable, it will be for a current issue that it's going to be on the air, let's say, in the next period. I hope it will not be energy, so we will not have to return to this. But I think it's a good start.
Yes.
So once again, thanks very much.